right to food is a constitutional right for all in our country, and it gives every child the right to basic nutrition. Yet at least a fifth of households run out of money for food before the month has ended. With millions of families in survival mode, many are left with no choice but to live on nutritionally inadequate food. This perpetuates cycles of poverty and malnutrition, but also undermines the fundamental human right to food security. Integral to this vicious cycle of poverty and malnutrition is big food, which has driven overconsumption of unhealthy food. For years, many of these companies have set their sights on emerging markets like Africa, selling products with harmful amounts of sugar, fat, and salt. In fact, research tells us that Nestlé is exposing young children from developing countries like South Africa to foods containing high levels of sugar. The researchers found that biscuit-flavored baby cereal contains 6 grams of sugar, while the same product sold in Switzerland, where Nestlé is headquartered, is available with no added sugar. On our show today, we have activists and experts who will help us understand how big food violates our right to nutritious food. Nzama Balati, social activist with a focus on public health for the past decade. Sasha Stevenson, section head, Section 27, and also human rights lawyer. Nomonde Buthelezi, urban farmer based in Cape Town, cultivating organic crops, co-founder and head of the food agency Cape Town, Fact, with her T-shirt. And lastly, Mervyn Abrams, program coordinator, Pietermaritzburg, economic justice and dignity, and also social activist. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Nzama, we're going to start straight with you. Millions of people are battling to afford basic items. Big food has certainly hijacked our food system, and also that latest research from Oxford University. Talk us through this.
So it's very interesting that we're having this conversation because food is part of our daily lives. Currently, whether poor or rich, what we eat and what influences our choices is the food environment that we live in. So in the past 3 decades, the big food industry have targeted countries such as South Africa as a market, to influence and actually overly promote and make unhealthy food available. As a result, and no wonder, we're having this new emerging big epidemic of obesity, where in 7 in 10 women are either obese or overweight. 1 in 3 men are actually either obese or overweight. And scary part is like 1 in 8 children are actually either obese or overweight. This is the cohort of children who will become adults and be pre-exposed to ill health. So this is a major problem. It's a huge problem in which we're not only dealing with the issue of food, but we're dealing with the issue of food and its relationship with our health and how it impacts our health. So this is very concerning, and something needs to be done urgently as a collective, as society, to redress and go back to our ways in which our food system was designed, where people were growing their own food, where people were able to actually eat healthy and be able to look at healthy food as fashionable compared to how the food industry has actually changed our mindset and the design of food system that is feeding us in an unhealthy food and resulting in ill health.
Important point. Sasha, now the right to food, as Nzama said, is actually enshrined in our very beautiful constitution, yet we have long-term food insecurity and millions actually go to bed hungry. What more should government be doing, and what should their role be in all of this?
Well, the government has a variety of obligations when it comes to realization of the right to food and realization of the right of children to basic nutrition. And that ranges from direct provision of food through programs like the National School Nutrition Program that feeds 9.6 million children every day. It's an incredible program that gives us a really good opportunity to ensure that learners, who are of course the future of the country, get access to the kind of nutrition that they need for their bodies and their brains to grow. But the obligation on the state doesn't stop there. It also relates to or it also includes an obligation to regulate the private sector. And they need to do so in a number of ways. They need to ensure, for example, that there is proper labeling of food so that people know what is in their food and they know what is dangerous or what could be harmful to health. There needs to be regulation of the consumption of sugar, and there's been some movement in that direction, but insufficient movement. And there needs to be regulation to ensure that the prices of food are such that people can actually afford to buy it. So there's a big obligation on the state to manage and to regulate big food in the private sector in the interest of everyone in South Africa.
Nomonde, as an urban-based farmer, you've heard what Sasha said about government's role, but we do know that price and accessibility is absolutely important, and poorer and vulnerable communities don't always have the luxury of that. What do you think should be done for us and for all our communities to be able to access healthier food?
First, it is important for me as a community person to understand what that article on the Constitution means, to have a right to food. What does that right look like? What does it mean to me? The government has some obligation to make sure that I have that access, but how do I hold government accountable? How do I even begin, to understanding that right, number one, what does it mean for me and how do I hold that person accountable? And then you have said that in a lot of challenges that we have, I may understand what healthy eating is, what a balanced meal is, but am I doing it? No. So all the contributing factors to that, I want something that's accessible. I want something that's convenient, quick to feed, because I get home, there's a lot that is happening. I still don't have time to, cook slow food, even though I understand how healthy and nutritious that is. What is important for me at that particular moment is I need something quick, I need a lot.
Mervyn, so we've heard accessibility, price, we've heard about the right to food in our Constitution. You work with communities. What's happening on the ground and your thoughts on this?
So, Crystal, what we, as the other speakers have said, the current food system, whether it be global or local, have forced the majority of South Africans into becoming consumers. And so we are net buyers of food, meaning we access our food from the retail sector. And when we do that, then two things are important. It's actually the price of the foods versus the amount of income that I have that will determine my access to food and will determine whether I consume nutritious, dense food or foods that are nutritionally inadequate.
Great point, Mervyn, and we are going to now see exactly what consumers have to make and the decisions they have to make. We recently spent some time with Sia in Khayelitsha. She does the shopping for her family. Here's her story.
I stay with my parents, two sisters, my daughter and my niece. I play a huge role. I'm a mediator. I'm the one who keeps the family together. I'm the one who's responsible for the groceries. My father is the one who buys the grocery because he's the head of the house most. So he gives me his card and then he also gives me the limit that you must use 3,000 rand. We buy the hampers, 10 kgs that will be always on sale, rice, meal, sugar. But we buy most sweet stuff because we have kids. So we buy yogurts for them, chips for them, drinks for us, juices for them. I'm not looking for the ingredients, no. I'm only looking for the prices. We like to braai, we like to fry. We just eat the food that we love. The other day, I was not feeling well, I was dizzy. And I thought that it's the way that I'm eating. And then I've discovered that I'm getting fatter and fatter. But I don't see something wrong with the food that I eat.
Ne-diabetes. Okay. Zonke ezo zigulo sendijonge iswekile yakho ke sisene. Anazela. Iswekile yakho iphezulwana, ayikho phezulu njengomuntu oneswekile, kodwa iphezulwana for umuntu ongenangxaki. meaning that izo-affecta ubana i-risk yakho yokuba ne-diabetes.
I'm looking if the food is good or bad for me. Is it healthy or what?
So what kind of information are they giving you?
Actually, there's nothing.
Mervyn, so I spent time with Sia in Khayelitsha. It's a family of 8. There's only one big food there, so your choices are very limited. And Sia was very frank. She has a budget, it's not a big budget, and she has to shop for her entire family for the month. Mervyn, your organization looks at that basket that Sia, and as you saw, that she shops. Talk us through what is in that basket and how has pricing changed over the past year?
So, Crystal, I truly understand what Sia was saying. The basket that we have of 44 very basic foods that we track on a monthly basis is constructed for a household of 7 and contains your basic foods such as maize meal and rice and potatoes and onions and chicken pieces and tomatoes and a little bit of peppers and bread and stock and salt. And so these 44 foods have skyrocketed in the last 2 years. So if you take the price of that basket in March of 2022, it then cost us 4,450.
And Sia has only 3,000
And
rand.
she only has 3,000, which means she cannot afford that entire basket. She could not afford it 2 years ago. But if you look at March of 2024, then you will see that basket has increased to 5,277 rand. That is an 827 rand increase, or an 18% increase. So what most households do, they cannot afford that basket of food, even though that basket is not nutritionally complete. But it contains some vegetables. I mean, let's look at potatoes, for instance. In March 2022, a 10 kg potatoes cost something in the region of 60 odd rand. Today, you will pay about 107 rand for that same basket of potatoes. So prices have become unaffordable, and that forces low-income households to go for the cheapest foods available. And of course, the cheapest foods available are the foods with the highest sugar content, for instance.
Nzama, you've seen the choices Sia has to make. Mervyn now outlined the details of how much that food basket is costing. What specific measures do you think should be put in place to regulate the availability of unhealthy foods?
In South Africa, we do have mechanisms in terms of taxation, what we call health taxes. One of the things we've been campaigning for as HEALA has been the health promotion levy. Combined with other health taxes such as taxation on alcohol, tobacco, and other unhealthy products. These can be something that can be soft ring-fenced and be allocated into, making sure that when we give relief to households and we can bring down the prices of food. This is very practical in terms of we are actually having mechanism for people who are consuming unhealthy products to pay a little bit much more. And this money can be actually be allocated into relieving, household in terms of the high prices of food. So we do have in our toolbox policies already that are existing. So we do need a strong taxation. We do need to strengthen our tax models to ensure that we can actually have more safety net to provide actually for the relief of consumers and households in ensuring that they afford food.
Sasha, so we saw with Sia, she went to the doctor. She's still very young, eh? And she is basically on her way to becoming diabetic. That talks to the cost on our healthcare system. Talk to us about some of the specific interventions that you think is needed. And should there perhaps be more incentives or subsidies made available so that people can access healthy food, and therefore the cost on our healthcare will be less.
I think you're completely right. You know, the cost of poor nutrition is spread across individuals, households, communities, and the state. When people are becoming, like in the case of Sia, becoming diabetic, when there are increasing levels of hypertension, when there's increasing obesity, that affects them deeply and it affects the health system. And so the government has to keep on investing in a health system that becomes more and more strained because of the impact of what people are eating. And so I think Nzama has laid out some of the important policy measures that can be taken to regulate big food, to regulate the consumption of some of the ultra-processed food, of some of the products that are high in sugar and in salt. And at the same time, there's a need to ensure that people can actually afford the healthy food, because it's not sufficient to tax and to limit the availability of the unhealthy food. We also need to make sure that people can access the healthy food. And that is the important balance that needs to be achieved. And there's an opportunity for the state to do its job in achieving that balance.
Nomonde, Sia has to make some tough choices and decisions. Your thoughts?
I can relate to Sia in so many ways. First, when she goes shopping, what she gets is determined by how much she has. So it's not by what she would want to have. So she's thinking about, there's so many mouths that I need to feed, and this is how much I have. So in as much as she would want certain brands or certain foods, she can't. So the price on the shelf dictates what she has access to or what she can get. She has a health scare with diabetes. At some point, I was diagnosed, I was a borderline diabetic. I have irritable bowel syndrome. And over the years, I've developed intolerance to lactose. And what she doesn't understand, she thinks she has that scare because of her bad eating habits, what she's consuming, and she looked at the shelf and she started reading labels. I was Sia, you know, when I was told borderline diabetic, it probably took me a week to be conscious of what I eat, and after that, it all went out the window. Because, I mean, what is in my cupboard? What can I access in the grocery store or in the supermarket? What she doesn't understand is what you mentioned in your intro about Nestle is, yes, we feed infants that food, but they're already born with some underlying conditions because of what us as parents consume when we are pregnant. So we don't have access to the healthy and nutritious food. Therefore, our kids are born with some of these conditions. Nestle only adds on, or these, even what's in the shelves only adds on what is already there. It highlights it more, it brings it out more. So you don't see it now immediately, but over the years, and then it comes out.
We headed to KwaZulu-Natal and the peri-urban area of Hammersdal and met Mr Mkize. He's a fruit seller. Take a look at his story.
Igama lami nguNicholas Mkhize. Nginengane eziwu-4. Mina ngedwa engisebenzayo ekhaya, so akekho omunye osebenzayo. So unkosikazi wami akasebenzi, nengane zami futhi nazo ayisebenzi. So ngiphila ngale business engiyenzayo. Inkinga ukuthi izinto seziyabiza manje. Sekuyabiza, petrol ikhuphukile, ama-price akhuphukile. Ama-apple lawa ngiwadayisa ka-4 rand la, 5 rand la, 4 rand la, 2 rand la each. Okay, siyabonga.
Ukhula Mkhize.
Ukudla lokhu engikudayisayo kuyabiza. So ngeke ngikwazi ukuthi ngisebenzise khona uma ngabe ngiqala ukudla. So ngisuke la ngithenge isinkwe brown, ngithenge icandy cookie, ngithenge nopolo. Just ukuthi ngithole energy, ngibe namandla. Ngoba mangabe ukuthi ngingasebenzisa imali yalokhu lokhu engidayisayo ngizoluza. hamba ke phela uma lapha mama. Phukile nogesi uphukile. Iyo into engikhathazayo nogesi ngikhokha imali eningi ngogesi. Ngoba ngeke ngikwazi ukuthi ungabukhona ugesi ngokufanele kuphekwe, kufanele ayinwe, kufanele kuwashwe ingubo zezingane, so into efanayo lezo.
Nomonde, we spent some time with Mr. Mkhize. We were at his house at 3:30 because he starts his day at 4. And you see, I mean, you're an urban farmer. Mr. Mkhize is not a farmer, but he sells fruit and veg, and he has to make some choices.
As an urban food grower, I grow organic vegetables, so I know the health or the nutrition that comes with that particular food. But I don't dare touch the very same vegetables that I'm growing. I see profit, you know, I look at my bed and I'm like, I can't take from this. So I'm looking at earning something. I'm excited when a Baki trader comes in and takes my produce and packages it nicely and sell it to somebody else to consume. Me and my community do not consume the very healthy vegetables that I'm growing.
Now, how do we ensure that fruit sellers like Mr. Mkhize, Mervyn, can be selling more to be able to feed his family healthy, nutritious food?
So I think, I mean, as Nomondo said, that we have a broken food system. And this broken food system is part of a larger, unequal economic system, which we have to first recognize before we can even begin to think what the possible solutions are. So just an example, for a worker, for instance, in South Africa who earns at the level of the national minimum wage, we know that about 60% of South African workers earn at that level, would bring home something in the region of about 4,500 Rand per month. Now, if you have to pay transport, which will take about 36% of that wage, and then you have to pay for about 350 kilowatts of electricity, which would take another 20% of that wage, you are left with something like 1,700 Rand, and that you could potentially spend on food. But now, if you divide that 1,700 into an average household of 4 persons, you end up with something like 450 Rand per person per month. So the small-scale farmer who are producing organic food in our communities have to take that food out of our communities in order to sell it to people who have higher levels of income. So we need to see the food system as part of the larger economic system. And until we are going to solve the issue of affordability, which is actually the levels of income, so that our small-scale farmers can be paid the value of their food, and that good, nutritious, dense food can actually remain in the community. But currently, the community cannot pay for it because they do not have sufficient income.
Sasha, Mr. Mkhize has to make some tough decisions, choices, but it's not only people like Mr. Mkhize across the country. This is the reality. Your thoughts?
We put so many people in South Africa in the perilous position of having insufficient income to buy the food that they know and we all know is healthy and nutritious. South Africa grows a lot of fresh fruit and vegetables, but so many people are unable to access that. And instead, they're forced to access the ultra-processed foods, which are not as healthy, which some researchers now are emerging to suggest have addictive properties, and that put people in a position where their own health is impacted and the health of their children. Something has got to give. And as Nzama said earlier, we do have some solutions. We have policies that are available to change this. We have the possibility of increasing the minimum wage, of increasing grants, so that people are actually able to afford the food that they want to be able to eat and that would be better for them to eat. And fortunately, we have a constitution that ensures that everyone has the right to sufficient food. And the word sufficient is important because it's not just that you have the right to something to put in your mouth. You have the right to sufficient food, and children have the right to basic nutrition. There we have a legal framework that allows us to change from the status quo, and we need to change fast.
Nzama, how do we get more public support for this?
Just imagine if we, looking at the real story of Mr Miz, if the local hospital was purchasing food, to feed patients from Mr Miz, what if the local schools, through the school nutrition program, because we know there's already budgets available to support nutrition in the school, if they were purchasing fruits and vegetables from Mr Miz. Just imagine if the local prison was actually purchasing for inmates food from Mr Miz. These are the things that we shouldn't just imagine. These are real life situations that we could actually just trigger by government procurement, make sure that we support small-scale food producers, small-scale farmers, break the monopoly of the big 4 or 5 supermarkets that have monopolized our food, and actually they killing the small role players and the local food producers at the local level. It's a win-win situation, growing the local economy, creating employment at the local, in the local level. So these are very practical things we can do, we can implement tomorrow.
A healthier South Africa is possible, Mervyn?
It definitely is possible if the political will exists to get that. And so I believe, and I would fully agree with what I'm saying, we need to get into our policymaker mindset that the future of South Africa, whether it be our economy, whether it be our health, whether it be our educational outcomes, depends on the food that African households are consuming today. Therein lies our future.
The future is in your hands, Nomonde?
I hope so. So as a community activist or a food activist, I have a responsibility to my community. I would love to actively participate in policy and decision-making, especially on issues that are affecting me directly as a right holder.
Last words, Sasha. A healthier South Africa is possible?
We know what we need, and we know how we can get there. And what's required now is for the policymakers to listen to Mr Miz, to listen to Sia, to listen to people who understand the way that the food system can change in the interests of everyone in South Africa.
Thank you, Sasha, Nomonde, Nzama, and Mervyn. We deserve to be healthy and have access to better food in South Africa, and it's our right to access nutritious food. Eating healthy should not be a luxury reserved only for those with money, and we need a concerted policy response to ensure that these rights are fulfilled. Thank you to our panel of experts today. We will be uploading more episodes on HEALA.org, and catch us on our social media pages.